Hi, welcome back. In this video, I want to show you how to draw the professor from Money Heist in a few simple and easy steps. So let's get started. As always, these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this 250 GSM paper from my ordinary smooth surface sketchbook, which is available in almost all the art stores or stationeries around the world. So you don't have to use any fancy paper for this specific drawing. And the drawing portion area is 9 x 12 inches. Before moving on to the grid making process, let's mask the edges of this drawing paper using a masking tape to prevent the graphite from spilling over the borders. I drew the outline using grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process from making the grid to outlining on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. Okay, so let's start the background shading process, and for that I'm scraping my 8B pencil onto the scraper first to convert it into a powder. You can also use a sandpaper or any other rough surface for this purpose. Now use this powder and start shading the background using a bigger size dry brush. I'm moving my hand in circular motions, and this will effectively fill the whole area without making it look patchy. Notice that I'm building a denser background on the top and then using less powder as I move downwards to create a perfect dark to light gradient. I'm following the similar process for the right side as well. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outline and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials. And you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions, where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. It has always been my goal to provide free tutorials and information on drawing and art related tools to general public. And keeping with that theme, I like to thank all these incredible individuals who backed our channel on Patreon last month. Their generous support enabled me to produce this free tutorial for all of you guys. Okay, so when you have filled the background with the graphite, it's time to blend and embed it into its place. And for that, I'm using a clean tissue paper and going over the area in circular motions. The upper portion is looking a bit dull to me, so I'm layering more powder until I achieve the required darkness. Now let's move on to the hair detailing, and for that I'm adding the directional lines for the hair clusters using my 8B pencil. First of all, understand the anatomy of hair, including how it clumps, falls and reflects light. This understanding will help you recreate realistic patterns and textures. I'm increasing the distance between the hair strokes for the clusters that are more defined, and then adding these strokes close together for the dark clusters. The hair on the left part of the head has a wave, for which I'm carefully adding the mixture of concave and convex lines or strokes to achieve this wave pattern. And make sure to join these strokes together carefully so that it can look like one wave stroke instead of intersected ends. When this left portion is filled with the directional strokes, I'm scraping my 8B pencil over the scraper to convert it into a powder. And now using this powder to shade the hair portion very carefully. I'm using my medium-sized dry brush and going over the darker portions first and then dragging the leftover powder towards the lighter portions. And notice that I'm using a mixture of back and forth and circular motions to add and blend this layer thoroughly. I'm also using the same powder to shade this right side as well. Now let's top off the whole hair portion with another layer of directional lines for the hair. And I'm using my 8B pencil. I'm following the similar process of adding individual hair strokes close together to add dimension to the hair clusters. This will help us in achieving a 3D base which is perfect to add details over it. Now lightly blend this layer using a medium-sized dry brush. Now it's time to add the highlights, and I'm firstly defining the shape of the ear using my perfection eraser. It's partially hidden behind the hair, so I'm carefully adding these curved strokes to mimic the raised part of the ear. The surroundings of this highlight looks a bit dull, so I'm adjusting it using my 8B pencil. Now moving on to the hair, and I'm now shifting towards my mono zero eraser and adding these highlights. I have created a flat tip and now adding these lighter strokes in between the darker ones we just added. Keep on adding these small strokes in between the darker ones, but keep the direction of the hair in mind to mimic the natural flow of hair. And make sure to clean the tip of your eraser more frequently while working on such darker areas, as the graphite tends to stick to the tip, making it dirty. And when you use the same dirty tip over the lighter areas, the excessive graphite from the tip will stick to the paper, making it look uneven and patchy. So always clean the tip after every 2 or 3 strokes to increase its effectiveness. Keep on adding these curved strokes and lines in between the darker ones for this whole left portion. Now moving on to the front part of the hair, and when we look at the reference image, we can see that there is a band of bright highlights near the forehead portion. And these highlights are making the hair cluster look shiny and curved. So I'm adding these small curved strokes in between the darker ones, just like the way I did for the left portion. I'm adding more strokes where I need the area to be more shiny and adding less strokes for the darker portions. This will make the hair look 3D by creating the right amount of depth and highlights. And keep on adding these strokes for the upper portion of the head as well. Just make sure to add slightly thicker and brighter strokes for this portion, as the light is hitting this portion, making it appear brighter. I'm also adding some strokes for these flyover hair, and look how detailed and natural the whole hair has started to look. Now moving on to the right side of the hair, and I'm following the similar process of adding curved individual hair strokes very carefully. And try to avoid adding too many of these strokes, as they will make the whole area look flat and unrealistic. Now let's add some definition and final touches to the hair section, and for that I'm using my 2B pencil. I'm firstly adding these individual hair strokes on the left edge of the hair to give it a more natural look. And now by using the same sharp tip of my 8B pencil, I'm going in between and over these lighter strokes. It will make the lighter strokes more defined and thin, along with toning them down a little bit, making the area look more natural. I'm also adding these strokes on the upper portion of the hair very carefully in between these lighter ones. Now let's add some brighter hair strokes, and for that I'm using my sharp tip electric eraser. I'm flicking my eraser and adding these curved strokes in between and over these previous hair strokes. And look how shiny the area has started to look, just like the way we want it here. I'm adjusting the thickness of these strokes by adding darker ones right beside the lighter ones. And look how crisp the strokes have started to look. Moving on to the right side, and I'm adding these darker strokes right beside the lighter ones, just like the way I've added earlier for this left portion. And just keep on relating to the reference image and add these strokes accordingly. For the individual hair on the edge, I'm switching my pencil with a 2B pencil and adding these thin strokes very carefully. Okay, so now let's move on to the forehead portion, and I'm firstly dabbing my kneaded eraser to pick up the excessive graphite. And now using tissue paper and moving my hand in circular motions to achieve a smooth canvas. Now grab your B pencil and start rubbing it over a scraper to convert it into a powder. And you can also use a sandpaper or any other rough surface for this purpose. Now I'm dabbing my medium-sized dry brush in this powder and shading the natural contours of the forehead. When the smaller sections are done, it's time to add a base layer on the whole forehead. And for that, I'm using a very less amount of B graphite powder and shading the area with a bigger sized dry brush. Make sure to move your hand in circular scribbling motions to avoid patchiness. Now let's blend this layer thoroughly, and I'm using a clean tissue paper and moving my hand in small circular motions. This will effectively blend the graphite into its place along with evenly blending it. The temples of the forehead are looking a bit dull, so I'm adjusting them by layering more graphite powder using a medium-sized dry brush. As always, I'm blending this layer with a soft tissue paper very carefully. There are some stubborn white spots that are not filled with graphite powder, so I'm using my 2H pencil and going over them. This will effectively fill those empty spots without messing up the surroundings. You can skip this step if your drawing is looking just as fine as we need. Now let's add some textural lines, and for that I'm using the same 2H pencil and adding these horizontal strokes. I'm also adding this dot to mimic the size of the mole by keeping the pressure high on my pencil. Now let's add the highlights, and when we look at the reference image, we can see that they are very soft and subtle. So to create such an effect, I'm using a sharp tip perfection eraser with a very low pressure and going right above the texture line we just added. I'm also adding some more strokes on the side of the texture line to give it a more detailed look. I'm also going in the center of the forehead and picking up the graphite to achieve the required shiny look. And now I'm toning down these highlights a little bit by going over them using tissue paper. I'm gently dabbing my kneaded eraser over the forehead where I want the area to be a bit lighter. Okay, so now let's add the individual hair on the hairline portion, and I'm using my sharp tip 2B pencil. I'm extending the previous hair cluster on the right side by flicking my pencil downwards. And now adding some new ones in between the previous ones to give the area a more natural look. I'm also adding these strokes for the roots of the hair in the front portion, along with adding these small individual hair strokes. I'm switching my pencil with an 8B pencil to add darker strokes in between the lighter ones or where required. And look how these small details made the forehead and hair look more natural and realistic. I'm also shading the left side of the forehead to create this shadowed effect. For the darker details, I'm using my 8B pencil to achieve the required depth. You can lightly blend this layer using a medium-sized toy brush, but make sure to keep the pressure very low to avoid smudging. Okay, so now let's move on to the next portion, and as always, I'm firstly darkening the directional line we have added during the outlining process. And I'm using my 8B pencil with pressure technique to fill this area. I'm keeping the pressure on my pencil high where I need darker details, and will decrease the pressure to add lighter details. And keep on darkening the directional line, and notice that I'm also shading some area to create a 3D base. This 3D base helps us in achieving realistic details in very less layers. As the light source is on the right side, so it is making the shadow appear on the left side of the nose. So I'm shading this area, keeping the pressure high to achieve the required base. Moving on to the beard portion, and I'm keeping the pressure high for the left side, as very less light is reaching here. And for the mustache, I'm adding these straight strokes close together by flicking my pencil back and forth. I'm following the similar back and forth flicking method to add these directional lines on the beard portion as well. Okay, so now for the claws, I'm following the similar method of darkening the directional lines first and then shading the area with the same pencil later on. Now to fill the rest of the portion, I'm scraping my 8B pencil onto a scraper to convert it into a powder. And now dipping my brush into the powder and shading this shirt portion. I'm layering more powder onto the darker areas and moving my hand in small circular motions, keeping the pressure very light. And now I'm using very less to no powder to shade these lighter portions. Now for the neck and face portion, I'm using the same 8B graphite powder and dipping my medium-sized dry brush to shade the area. Now I'm defining the outline of the ear and extending the previous directional lines for the hair. I'm also adding small hair strokes on the left portion as well. Okay, so now it's time to blend the whole face and neck portion, and as always, I'm using a soft tissue paper and going over the area in circular motions. This will help us in achieving a smooth 3D base perfect for the highlights later on. Make sure to change the side of the tissue paper and use cleaner side every now and then to avoid patchiness. Some of the darker texture on the face is still looking a bit dull to me, so I'm again using my 8B pencil and adding the depth and texture on these required portions. Now let's blend this layer, and I'm using my medium-sized dry brush so that I can only target the required portions and avoid smudging. If we look closer, we can see some empty spots, so to fill them, I'm using my 2H pencil. It will effectively fill all the empty spots along with locking the graphite from the previous layers into its place, giving us a very smooth base. I'm switching my pencil in between with an 8B pencil to add the missing details where required. Okay, so here comes the most interesting part, which is highlighting. And as always, I'll be adding a base highlight first. And for that, I'm using my perfection eraser and going over the inner corner and the sclera of the eye. Now to create some depth around the sclera, I'm using my 8B pencil and shading the edges very carefully by keeping the pressure low. Now let's lock this layer in, and for that, I'm going over it using my 2H pencil. It will fill all the empty spots if any, along with embedding the graphite into its place. I call this graphite locking technique, and by using this method you can achieve a smooth layer without making the area look dull. Okay, so now let's add more brightness to the previous highlights, and for that I'm using my flat tip mono zero eraser and going right beneath the iris. And look how this small stroke made the sclera look 3D. You can adjust the edges of the highlights by going over them using a 2H pencil. Okay, so now it's time to add life in the iris, and for that I'm using my sharp tip electric eraser and adding these small dots for the reflection of the light in the eye. I'm using the same electric eraser and adding the highlights in the inner corner of the eye. Now for the softer highlights, I'm shifting towards my perfection eraser. You can always fine tune the highlights by layering brighter ones over the softer ones. And for that, I'm using my mono zero eraser and electric eraser respectively. Okay, so now for the highlights, I'm using my flat tip mono zero eraser and going along the edge inside the glasses. I'm adding this straight horizontal line right beside the darker one, and look how it amped up the whole look of it. I'm also going along the left edge to create the illusion of the glass. The corner of the glasses is still looking less bright to me, so I'm adding this curved stroke using my sharp tip electric eraser. When we look at the reference image, we can see that the skin looks quite smooth and has very subtle highlights. So to mimic such an effect, I'm using my kneaded eraser first to pick up the excessive graphite. Now to further fine tune these highlights, I'm using my perfection eraser and picking up the graphite. Notice that I'm maintaining a very low angle and less pressure to achieve softer highlights. For the nose, I'm picking up the graphite from the tip of the nose first and then gradually moving my hand up to achieve a blended soft look. I'm also adding this highlight on the left nostril portion to make it look shiny. Now to add shiny texture to the nose, I'm adding these small dots of random sizes using my electric eraser. I'm creating a small cluster on the tip of the nose and then increasing the distance between these dots as I move upwards. Okay, so now let's move on to the cheek portion, and as always I'm picking up the graphite using my perfection eraser. Now to create the soft edges of the highlight we just added, I'm using my kneaded eraser and lightly dabbing it. Coming back to the perfection eraser, and now it's time to add the texture. And for that, I'm adding these small slant strokes for the left side of the face. Notice that I'm only adding these strokes over these lighter areas. Okay, so now moving on to the right side, and the process here is almost the same we followed for the left one. The only difference here is that the highlights are relatively sharper than the left ones. So I'm using my mono zero eraser with a clean flat tip to mimic such bright texture. I'm firstly adding the highlights on the glasses just like the way I did earlier for the left portion. And now using the same mono zero eraser and adding these small slant strokes to mimic the skin texture. And as I move towards the right side, the texture is becoming relatively softer. So I'm switching my eraser with a perfection eraser and adding these strokes respectively. This will create a perfect gradient of highlights from sharp to the softer ones without any harsh barrier between them. I'm using the same perfection eraser to add the highlights on the eye bag portion as well. But make sure to go over the lighter portions only to avoid a unitoned surface. For the brighter highlights on the eye, I'm using my flat tip mono zero eraser and adding these small intricate details. Now let's make the iris shiny, and I'm adding these dots for the reflection of the light using my electric eraser, just like the way I did earlier. I'm also adding this softer highlight onto the right side of the nostril, and look how this small detail popped up the whole look of the nose. Some areas are still looking less detailed to me, so I'm using my electric eraser and adding these brighter strokes and dots where required. For the area under the right eye, I'm adding another layer of skin texture, just like the way I've added earlier using my mono zero eraser. Okay, so now let's move on to the eyebrows, and I'm adding these strokes for the individual eyebrow hair for the starting portion of the eyebrow using an 8B pencil. Carefully analyze the reference image to determine the natural arch, thickness and direction of the hair, and then place the tip of your pencil from where you want to start the hair and gradually flick it in one go to achieve an even stroke with a needle-like thin end. Now I am highlighting the top portion of the eyebrow by using a perfection eraser. I'm adding these soft slant strokes and blending them afterwards using my finger to achieve subtle highlights. I'm following the similar process for the right eyebrow as well. The highlight on the left edge of the glasses is missing. And to achieve bright and sharp results, I'm using my electric razor with a thin and sharp tip. And look how these small strokes added so much dimension to the glasses frame. I'm adding such bright highlights on the right side of the glasses frame as well and adjusting its thickness later on. Now moving on to the cheek, and let's pick up the excessive graphite using a perfection eraser first. And it's time to add the skin texture, and for that I'm adding these small slant strokes by using Mono Zero Eraser. Notice that I've created a flat tip of my eraser and using the sharp edge to add these strokes of random sizes. Now before adding more texture on the cheek, let's first add the beard hair so that the skin texture doesn't mix up with it. And I'm using my 8B pencil and placing it from where I want to start the hair stroke and then gradually flicking it downwards. You can also use a back and forth flicking method to achieve such hair strokes. Make sure to keep the pressure low at the start and then increase it while doing the flicking motion. In this way, you will achieve a softer end and defined hair strokes. Now for the area slightly above the beard portion, I'm adding these thin and delicate strokes by keeping the pressure very low. When the first layer is done, I'm adding some filling strokes on the empty spots by maintaining a high pressure on my pencil. And look how realistic the beard portion has started to look. Now continue adding the skin texture using a flat tip Mono Zero Eraser, just like the way we added earlier. Make sure to keep the length of these strokes random to give the area a more natural look. I'm also adding these strokes right beside the darker ones on the beard as well. This dark and light contrast will immediately make the beard hair look shiny and 3D. And don't add too many of these lighter strokes as it will make the area look flat. I'm adding some darker strokes using the 8B pencil on this left side as well. Now by using this same pencil, let's add these small dots on this area above the beard to mimic these small baby hair. I'm lightly picking up the graphite from this portion of the beard using a perfection eraser to give it more dimension. Now moving on to the next portion, and as you can see, I have created a chisel tip of my 8B pencil and now adding these strokes for the mustache and beard portion. And keep on adding these strokes for the whole beard portion, but make sure to keep the tip sharp to increase its effectiveness. I'm also adding a base layer onto the lips portion using a B pencil. I'm applying lower pressure to shade the lighter areas and then gradually increasing it to create depth. Now let's switch the pencil and use 8B to add these textural lines onto the lips or where required. Okay, so now it's time to add the highlights, and I'm following the similar method of adding lighter strokes right beside these darker ones. Also notice that I'm adding these strokes on selective areas as too many of such brighter details will make the area look too unrealistic. Moving on to the lips, and they have smooth and blurry highlights. So for that, I'm using my perfection eraser with a round tip. I'm going over the upper and lower lip to create a base. And then using Mono Zero Eraser to add those brighter strokes for the wrinkle details. I'm using my sharp tip electric razor to make some of these strokes even more bright and shiny. Now I am toning down the harsh edges if any using my dry brush and kneaded eraser. For the chin, I'm using my perfection eraser onto the skin portion to achieve soft highlights. And then continue adding the highlights onto the beard using Mono Zero Eraser just like the way I did earlier. Okay, so as always, I'm picking up the excess graphite first using perfection eraser and then extending the hair strokes, and will add highlights later on as I did earlier. Okay, so moving on to the neck, and it doesn't have so many details, so I'm gently picking up the graphite using my perfection eraser. I'm moving my hand in back and forth motions, and look how realistic the neck has started to look. I'm now dabbing my kneaded eraser to add the soft texture on the required portions. Okay, so moving on to the collar, and I'm firstly shading it using a big graphite powder with a medium-sized dry brush. And now blending it thoroughly with a soft tissue paper by moving my hand in small circular motions. Now let's add the missing shadow on the neck using an 8B pencil very carefully. Okay, so it's time to add the highlights, and the drill is the same. I'm using a perfection eraser for the softer highlights, and then I will use Mono Zero Eraser for the brighter ones. This will create a perfect blended and highlighted look. I'm also using a kneaded eraser to pick up the excess graphite from the collar. For the shirt, I'm firstly darkening the shadowed portions using an 8B pencil. and then adding these dots of random sizes for the texture of the tie using a perfection eraser. For the left side of the coat, I'm using these darker textural curved lines using an 8B pencil and blending them afterwards, and then adding these lighter dots and strokes using a perfection eraser. The rest of the coat has just the darker details, so I'm adding the contrast and shadows using an 8B pencil. I'm adjusting the background for the lower portion to create a required gradient. I almost forgot to add the details in the right ear, so I'm adding the darker and lighter details right now. And with this last step, we are done with this quick and realistic professor's portrait. Creating these free drawing tutorials needs a significant amount of time and energy. So if you found this one valuable, please show your support by liking this video. Your support keeps me inspired to bring you more creative content. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.